Hello and welcome to today's Beyond Zero tidbit. I am Catherine, also known as Punch Life Back on Twitch, and of course, we are the Matrix Guard. So today's tidbit is all about habit formation, or as I kind of like to call it, the harnessing our zombie brain for good. And if that's too weird, the other way I look at it is it's really just looking at what the science says about how to become more of a habit ninja. So, all right, without any further ado, let's unpack it. So, our habits are they're a recurring decision-making process that happens in our subconscious brain, and therefore they require minimal effort on our part, which is great. And this is why I think of it in terms of being a zombie. Habits are like zombies, where they're just on autopilot and they just mindlessly do these things. And it's an important function for our brain. It helps us navigate the countless decisions that we have to make every single day. I mean, just imagine if our choices required conscious effort. We'd be so overwhelmed by the energy lift that we would become frozen by either indecision or decision fatigue or backlog. So what does science say about habits, and how can we use that to power up our own habits? So they're either constructive, good for us, or destructive, bad for us. And here's the crucial part. They are an automatic response to a contextual cue. So let me give you some examples of that. So cues can be anything from getting into the car to meeting a stranger to feeling anxiety, feeling anxious. So cues are very broad, and really anything can become a cue as long as they are frequent and consistent in your daily life. So they tend to be things like events, locations, moods, time of day. All right. So some examples of a habit being in response to a contextual cue. So like I said, getting into a car. A good automatic response would be buckling your seatbelt. A bad for you or destructive automatic response would be lighting up your cigarette. Feeling bored. A good automatic or beneficial constructive automatic response would be maybe meditating, whereas maybe a bad automatic response would be binge watching television. Seeing a loved one as a cue could mean you're habituated to hug them, or it could mean that you're habituated to get on your cell phone and kind of pick away at the relationship itself, right? Meeting a stranger. A good automatic response is to shake hands. A bad automatic response would be standing in their space bubble and making them feel uncomfortable. Waking up in the morning as a cue could lead to exercising, or it could lead to drinking a soda. And feeling lonely. That could lead to calling a friend, or it could lead to binge eating, right? So I hope you're getting the idea of habits being in response to a cue, and that they are either good for us or bad for us. So any action taken in response to a cue, given enough time and consistency, becomes habitual, and it will happen automatically. But how much time? So contrary to popular belief, it is not, and I repeat, not 21 days. No, that is an urban myth, and it looks like that was based off of anecdotal stories from plastic surgery patients, and that was the amount of time it took them to adjust to their new appearance. Just anecdotal, that's not actual science, right? So that is an urban myth. It is not 21 days. The science actually says that it takes a habit about 18 to 284 days to form. So an action requires 18 to 284 days to become a habit, of repeated daily use to become a habit, with an average of 66 days. So yes, I get it. That seems like a heavy lift, but it does get easier progressively as you go. And once established, the action that used to require motivation now happens effortlessly. So it is absolutely worth doing. Worth putting in the effort to get through 18 to 284 days before something becomes a habit and happens automatically. So here's another really good, encouraging bit of news. If you miss a day here or there, that is okay. It is not an excuse to give up, call it quits, or start all over. No. It does result in a dip in the automation the day after your miss, but there really shouldn't be any long-term adverse effects. So please do not worry about the stumble, just keep at it. So how do we use this knowledge as a life hack and actually power up our habits? So because habits are dependent on those contextual triggers, they are vulnerable to change, and that is amazing. So if you want to change, this is just like a little side note. If you want to change, or you need to change or implement a bunch of new habits at once, it can help to do so while undergoing a significant life-changing event like moving to a new city or taking on a new job, because your routine is changing so dramatically that it's likely that all of your habituated cues will be disappearing or changing. Okay, so that's just kind of a side note. If for whatever reason you're looking and you're going, oh my gosh, I have got to change everything right now, you might want to go on vacation. So you can change your bad habits or implement new good habits through a technique called implementation intentions. And a lot of what I'm presenting here today comes from a book called How Not to Diet by Dr. Greger. I highly recommend it. He is a doctor. He's put together a team of researchers that just delve into what the actual research says around diet and nutrition. But out of his intensely, evidence-based, I don't know, he's like the king of of taking evidence and translating it into what lay people can understand. He had an amazing chapter on changing habits. So I'm going to quote him a little bit. So he says that implementation intentions are specific if-then plans to perform a particular behavior in a special context. They take the form of, when situation X arises, I will perform Y response. If the triggering circumstance is a regular, daily occurrence, implementation intentions can be the beginning of a beautiful habit. So here's what that means. When X, that's your cue. When X, I will Y. Y is your habit. Okay, so let's look at this. It's pretty simple, right? Let's look at this through the lens of bad habits. To change a bad habit, you can focus on removing the habits cues from your life, right? Which is why doing this during a move is often helpful. This is why addicts are encouraged to throw out their drugs and change their friend group, or why people on diets are encouraged to get rid of all the junk food in their house. You want to remove as many cues as possible around your bad habits. That is common sense, and it is actually backed up by science. But that's not the whole thing. So you can also change a bad habit by changing the action, the associated action, right? The bad habit action via an implementation intention. So for example, if you ate junk food every time you watch TV, okay, and you'd like to stop doing that, instead of doing what most of us do and say, I'm not gonna eat junk food anymore, and just like try to use willpower to somehow magically erase your bad habit, you instead say something like, when I watch TV, I will eat a piece of fruit, or I will snack on veggies and hummus, right? Whatever your good habit is that you're trying to use to replace the bad habit. So it's not about not doing something. This is crucial. It's not about not doing something. It's about choosing a new action, and let it be one that supports you, one that's good, one that's constructive. So research has found that, and this is Dr. Greger, to activate the habit-forming mechanism, you likely need a new alternative response rather than a non-response. Evidentially, you can't form a habit of not doing something. Totally counterintuitive, guys, and yet it's true. So hopefully if you take away anything from this, take away that. So you will need to repeat your new good action day after day, month after month, that time frame, average of 66 days, before it becomes your habit, and binging on junk food during TV is a thing of the past, and now you're eating fruit. But it is so worth it. Okay, so now let's look at this through the lens of establishing good habits. So we've already seen how you can build a good habit by using it as a replacement for a bad habit. But you can also learn a new habit by attaching it to a cue, right? Attaching it to a trigger that isn't already associated with a bad habit. So for example, I am working on using Habitica more and more frequently in my life. And Habitica, if you haven't heard me talk about it, there's an invitation to join us there. We have a party, a group, and it is a free web-based service that is a habit tracking tool. And it's a way of gamifying your life. So it makes habit formation more fun, especially if you are a gamer in any stripe. So what implementation intention can I use or create to build Habitica as a daily habit in my life? So I would think of all the cues that I have, that I experience day in and day out, that I could attach this to. So for example, when I wake up in the morning, I check in with Habitica. Or when I feel bored, I log into Habitica, right? Or when I log into Twitch, which I do regularly, I'll check in with Habitica. So let's put this into action. There are five steps, and this is in the worksheet. So if you are a patron or you are a Twitch sub, you have access to this worksheet. If not, you want to just take notes, and then you can follow along from your notes. So this is all work you're going to leave here and hopefully be inspired to do. So you're going to start by creating a list. You're going to have 3 lists. One is of your bad habits that you would like to change. One is of the good habits you want to adopt. And one is all of the daily cues that you can think of that you experience regularly in your daily life. Step 2 is to kind of take that process slowly, especially when it comes to bad behaviors, because the more space you can give yourself to actually observe your behaviors in real time, the more insightful your list is going to be. So example, take like a week or just a couple days to observe and watch for your bad habits. And when they arise, do your best to capture the cue that triggered them, right? Because if you're wanting to change these bad habits, knowing what the cue is everything, because that's when you can attach a good habit to that cue and erase the bad habit over time. So you want to create a list of that. If you're going to choose to do this over a longer period of time, you want to track your bad habits and the cues as they arise in real time. So step 3 is kind of the fun part. It's where you start to write out your when X, I will Y statements. So if you discovered any new bad habits in that second step, add them to your original list so you have a master list of everything. And then you want to pair your good habits to bad habits whenever it makes sense to do so. So for example, there's that eating the piece of fruit while watching TV instead of binging on junk food. And then you want to create new XY statements for any remaining good habits by using your daily cues list. So here's where this, I think, gets the trickiest. It is unlikely that we will be able to implement all of this at once. That is an incredibly heavy lift, and people who do that tend to fail and then get really discouraged. So it's about somehow being able to prioritize the changes and roll them out consistently and steadily over time. That is going to increase the likelihood of success here. So you don't want to implement too many or too few at once. And I'm going to talk about how to do that in just a little bit. The last step here is that you want to look again at your bad habits that you are currently working on changing. And you want to take the time to remove all of the related cues that you can. So remember, get the junk food out of the house, like pour the alcohol down the drain, like whatever your version of that is, take the time to do it. It is very helpful in setting you up for success. So, okay, so this little part about prioritization, you can use a tool called AIM, and that stands for acceptable, ideal, and middle. And it's a tool for prioritizing goals. So how to use it is you write down the minimum, like acceptable achievement that you are willing to tolerate, that you could tolerate. So it's like, what is the absolute minimum change you would be okay making? And you just want to get super clear on that. The second part, the ideal, is you want to write down the ideal maximum result, right? So that would be, tends to be where most of us start and then burn out, right? Because it's super overwhelming. It's things like, I'm going to undo all of my bad habits in the next 6 months, or I'm going to find and marry my future husband in the next year, right? These huge, audacious goals that really excite us, but tend to be a lot to take on at once. You want to write that down. And then you find the middle. And this is where you really want to work from. So this is your realistic stretch. It's not so much that you burn out, and it's not so little that you get bored and lose all sense of motivation and you stop. So that can help with the prioritization piece. And just a couple final pieces here, you guys. There are 2 cognitive biases that can derail this process. So I want to take a little second here to mention them. So the first is known as the what the hell effect. And this is an irrational reaction to overindulging, where we permit ourselves to keep indulging because the day is already lost, right? I think we are probably all guilty of doing this. I know I certainly am. So cheating or mistakes can be so demotivating that we revert to all or nothing thinking. So for example, like if you've sworn off all sodas, and you've just had it, like you're gonna go and buy a Coke, right? You're gonna I deserve a Coke or whatever, I'm gonna drink a Coke. I have then been like, I messed up today, so I'm gonna buy 3 Cokes and really enjoy it, right? Like, no. So there are 3 ways to fight this destructive bias in ourselves. So 1 is to lengthen your time frame. So instead of saying like, I'm not gonna do X each day, so for example, I'm only gonna watch 1 episode of TV a day, lengthen that time frame to I'm gonna watch no more than 7 episodes each week. You see how that is? So if you end up watching 2 episodes in one day, instead of being like, oh, well, it's all or nothing, so I can watch 8 episodes now, you go, no, I have 5 episodes left this week. You see? Okay. So the other option is to choose positive goals instead of negative ones. So remember, instead of saying I'm not going to do something, you can choose to do something instead. So taking the TV as an example, instead of saying I'm only going to watch X amount per Y amount of time, you can just totally change that and say I'm going to read 1 book a week. And guess what? That probably means you don't have much time to watch TV, right? So there's creativity that's involved too. And finally, you can just learn to catch that biased thinking as it happens and realize how ridiculous it is and kind of just laugh it off. Okay, so that's the what the hell effect. Relatedly, the second bias is the self-licensing trap. And this is where we justify indulgence. All right. And it's the I work so hard this week, I deserve to Y, which is how I often end up buying a Coca-Cola. So this also includes self-delusion, which I think is just fascinating. And it's because this bias is so powerful that we actually often inaccurately remember how well we've done. And then when we're presented with temptation. So Dr. Greger says, even visions of future progress can trigger licensing and undercut our goals. How many times have you been tempted to slip just this once, resolving to make it up tomorrow, but tomorrow may never come? That's me. So what's crazy about this particular bias is the people most vulnerable to it are the ones that have the most self-discipline. What? And that's because they are so sure that they can say no tomorrow that they feel the license to say yes today. That is absolutely me. So the best way to counterpunch this bias is by making each decision based on its own merits in the present moment. So really ask yourself, what's the best choice now to fulfill your long-term goal? Last little side point, you guys. Can cheating ever be okay? And the answer seems to be yes, when it's planned. So Dr. Greger says, those who prearrange to give themselves a certain number of days, a certain number of passes every month to skip the gym or eat whatever they want can do so without deceiving themselves or inviting the wrath of the what the hell effect. All right, you guys. So like I said, you're invited to join us with Habitica if you want support, like group support around habit development. And if you're interested in doing that, email me at punchlifeback@thematrixguard.com or info@thematrixguard.com, and I will hook you up. It is free and it is fun, and I look forward to seeing you there. All right, until next time, stay true and never settle.